So today I want to talk about my favorite defenseman in the 2022 draft class. Starting off with my top ranked defenseman, David Jiricek. What I like about Jiricek so much is that he is big and he's a good skater and he drives good results on defense. Having the size that he does and the skating he does, or really that combination of size and skating is pretty rare. And to me, those are the two biggest, like, foundational blocks that you can build around as a prospect on defense. So Juracek might not have as much of the offensive skill as some of the other guys on this list have at this point, but I think he has a really, really solid foundation, and it's not like he doesn't show flashes of pretty good skill on offense as well. I do think he's a really good puck carrier as well, really good in transition. And for all those reasons, I have Juracek as my best defenseman in the draft class. My second best defenseman in this draft class is, of course, Simon Nemec. Now, Nemec probably has shown the highest upside of any defenseman in this class. I think if there is one guy who is likely to really hit it off and become a really solid point producer more than anybody else in this draft class, it will be Simon Nemec. But there are some things that concern me about his game, which is why I do not have him as my best defenseman. First, he is not the best in transition. I mean, he is pretty good in transition, but he prefers to pass rather than carry the puck, which I don't love. He is pretty good at carrying the puck. I wish he would do it more often, but as of right now, I can only judge him based off the way he plays, and he does prefer to pass the puck. He doesn't play at the highest pace either. And what I mean by that is everything becomes harder when you are going at full speed, and especially when the players around you are becoming faster as well. And when he's playing at full speed in the Pro League in Slovakia, he doesn't read situations as well as he could if he wasn't playing at his full speed. He doesn't execute plays as well either, whether that's a pass or a deke or a shot attempt, whatever it is. And that does worry me a bit just because when he's playing at higher levels, like the men's league in Slovakia is not exactly a great league. It is a pro league, so I will give him credit for that because it is tough for prospects playing in pro leagues, but the NHL is a lot faster and a lot bigger. Well, I want not necessarily bigger, but it's definitely a lot faster than the Pro League in Slovakia. So he will have to improve his pace if he's going to succeed, at least in like a two-way sense. He could end up being a really good offensive guy who is just kind of a liability on defense, but if that's his floor, then that's still decent. But yeah, he is my second best defenseman in the draft class. My third favorite defenseman is Kevin Korczynski, and he's a little bit like a budget version of David Jiricek, I would say. He is almost as tall, almost basically the same size, roughly, and he is a pretty good skater as well. Not as good as Jiricek, though, I would say, but he can make some pretty questionable decisions, like weird stretch pass attempts, uh, not making simple plays in the defensive zone that lead to chances against. So he's definitely not the most reliable defenseman in terms of defense amongst these guys, but he was still second on his team in plus minus, only behind overager forward Jared Davidson, who very well could get drafted as an overager this year. My fourth ranked defenseman in this class is Pavel Mintiukov, and really he's just an upside guy for me. I think his upside is really high when it comes to offense, but his defense does need quite a bit of work. I will mention plus minus again here, and I know it's not a great stat, but it does give you an idea because he was a minus 14 despite being about a point per game, and he was on the third best team in the OHL as well. He's on a really good team, put up a lot of points, was still a minus 14. I think that does give you an idea what his defensive game is like, and it needs to improve. But the offense is there, the skill is there. Skating could improve a little bit as well, gap control, just defense in general. But if you want to swing on a guy for upside, Mintyukov is, well, he's one of your options. My fifth favorite defenseman in this draft class is Owen Pickering, and a lot like Jiricek, the things I really like about Pickering are his size and his skating. He is, I believe, the largest player on this list at 6'5", and he is a pretty good skater, especially considering his size. So again, those things I think are the foundations of a really strong defenseman. His offense isn't necessarily there. I don't think he has a ton of upside in terms of point production at the NHL level, but he could be a really solid physical two-way guy. Maybe like a Sergachev type who, well, I to be honest, I don't really know how good Sergachev is on defense, but in terms of offense, I think that is probably about his upside, but his defense could actually use some work. Um, he is not very aggressive on defense. I would like to see him be more aggressive at times. He can be kind of just standing around a little bit, not pressuring the puck carrier as much as I would like. But those are things that can be coached into his game. And like the old saying goes, you can't coach size. So for those reasons, I have Pickering as my fifth best defenseman in the 2022 draft class. At sixth, I have Russian defenseman Vladimir Grudenen. Now, Grudinen is one of my favorite players to come out of the MHL this season, although he did also play at the VHL and a little bit at the KHL this year, although I only saw games where he played in the MHL, so I can only really speak to how he played in that league. And he played well. I was very impressed. He he had 13 games. 13 games? He had 13 points in 18 games, which is really respectable, and he was a plus 13 as well, which is also really respectable. And just looking at his numbers from the other leagues as well, it seemed like he kind of put up similar levels of production, like scaled to the higher leagues. So he had 1 point in 6 games, for example, in the KHL, and was a even plus minus, which is pretty solid for a 17-year-old playing in the KHL. Now, he is small. He's 5'10", listed at 159 pounds, according to Elite Prospects. So you do have to take that into consideration. Some of these guys are small, but he is not quite as small as the guy I have at seventh, which is Lane Hutson. Hudson is probably the smallest defenseman that will get drafted this year. He is listed at 5'8", but he has shown pretty high upside, really on both ends of the ice. He was over a point per game in both the USHL and the US Development Program because he is from the US National Team Development Program and they do play in two different leagues. And he was a combined plus 86 in 87 games. So I believe he was a plus 27 in 27 games in the USHL, which is very impressive. And he was a plus 59 in 60 games in the development program. So really solid results on both ends of the ice for him. Basically, being a plus per game is really solid for any junior player. and being over a point per game as well as a defenseman, those are really, really good results that are hard to ignore. I suspect if Hudson was 5'10" or taller, he would be in discussion for the best defenseman in the draft class. But again, because of his size, there is risk there. Size is especially important for defensemen because it helps with gap control. You have a longer stick, so you have a bigger reach. And one thing to keep in mind with smaller players is they can be prone to injury, especially at the NHL level where some guys are just really, really physical. And let's be honest, they will not necessarily target small players, but they'll know that they can hit a small player and it might impact them more. And they might even get them in the head, but a lot of times they will get away with it because, oh, well, it was a 6'4" guy hitting a 5'8" guy. What is he supposed to do, right? He can't avoid hitting him in the head, right? I mean, that's the reasoning you see online all the time. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is the reality, and a lot of times those hits do go unpunished, so that is a risk with small defensemen and small players in general. My 8th best defenseman in the 2022 draft class is Christian Kyrou. He's another relatively small guy. He's 5'10", 172. So he is taller than Hudson, but still pretty small for defenseman standards. And he really had pretty solid results on a really bad team. The only players on his team who played the entire season that had a better plus minus than he did, were 3 overager forwards, so not too surprising there. And he really showed at times flashes of really high skill. He had solid points production throughout the season, and he has pedigree, right? His brother is a really solid player in the NHL, and that doesn't really mean anything, but it does give me a good feeling about him. I'm not gonna lie. Some of these players you get a good feeling about when they have brothers in the league, and some of them you don't. With Kyrou, I definitely get that feeling. So yeah, he is my 8th best defenseman in this draft class. My 9th best defenseman, perhaps somewhat controversially, a lot of people seem to have this guy ranked quite a bit higher, especially over guys like Kyrou and Hudson, and that is Denton Mateychuk. So my main thing with Mateychuk is he has a weird way of playing defense. He is quite often playing a bit like a winger, like a forward, not even like a center. Like he will be deep in the offensive zone a lot, trying to create offense, which you got to respect. But when it doesn't work, puck goes the other way, and he is behind the play a lot. And I'm not sure how that style is going to translate to higher levels of hockey. Maybe it gets coached out of him. Maybe it doesn't. His defensive involvement when he is back is not that bad. I will give him that. He does pressure guys pretty well. But, and the skills are there for him to produce at the NHL level as well, if he makes it. I do think he is kind of a boomer bust guy, so he is a bit risky, but the skill level is there. The defensive responsibility is kind of there when he's not, way deep in the offensive zone, but he's a tough guy to get a read on, to be honest. So I have him at 9, but I could easily see him a lot higher or really even a lot lower. Finally, rounding out this list as my 10th best defenseman in this draft class, I have Sheamus Casey. So with Casey, I'm going to get the bad stuff out of the way first. He is not very aggressive on defense, a bit like Pickering. He's not a great skater, which kind of hurts him more than it would for other players because he's also small. I believe he is also listed at 5'10". So when you're small and you're not a great skater, that kind of hurts because to really succeed at the NHL level, at the pace of play in the NHL, with the physicality of the league, if you're going to be an undersized defenseman, you have to be really agile. You're going to have to be avoiding hits, and you're going to have to be you're going to have to find ways to beat guys with agility and quickness and deception. And Casey hasn't really shown too much of that this year, but he has driven really, really good results, or at least he has been on the ice for really good results. He hasn't put up a ton of points, but his analytics are good, so I do have him at 10. And one thing I did forget to mention with Matejchuk that I wanted to, just really quick fun fact, he's actually cousins with Owen Pickering. So Pickering and Matejchuk are cousins. That's something I didn't know until I was doing the research for this video. So that's pretty cool. They couldn't really be too much different in terms of how they play hockey. But there you go. There's my top 10 defensemen for this draft class. If you agree with my list, that's awesome. If you don't, I'd love to hear your opinions. Go ahead and leave a comment below. What do you think about some of these guys? If you did like the video, please do give it a like. That really helps me out. And I'll put a video on the screen now. You can go ahead and click on that one. And with all that being said, have a nice day.